So yes, you and I spend a hell of a lot of time driving Porsches. However, while we were celebrating the long Independence Day holiday here in the US, the old world was very busy making news. And not just in the car world, they made news in the car, technology, and business worlds. You see, the Volkswagen Auto Group brought together a 112-year-old brand, Bugatti, with a 12-year-old Croatian startup, Rimac. Now yes, one could say that's going to spell a lot of change for Bugatti in the near to medium term, but much more importantly, this one joint venture is going to have a huge impact that is going to resonate throughout the entire car world. Okay, so before we dive off into how this is a pivotal deal and how it will shape the car and technology worlds for many years to come, first a bit of housekeeping. Would greatly appreciate your help with the algorithm. That translates to hitting the like button, leaving a comment, and most importantly, sharing this with your friends on your socials. Yes, that includes the usual suspects, but most importantly, that includes Reddit. That's the platform where we see the most lift, not just through views, but discovery to new viewers. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, let's answer the obvious question. What exactly is this deal? Well, at its root level, it is a rather complex joint venture between the Volkswagen Auto Group and Rimac of Croatia. But first, we have to understand how some of the chess pieces got to where they are today, and that would bring us back to 1998 when Bugatti was acquired by the Volkswagen Auto Group. Then we got to fast forward to 2018. That's when Porsche, also part of the Volkswagen Auto Group, made a strategic investment into Rimac of Croatia. Then there's Rimac itself. Most people, they look at it and say, yeah, they make EV hypercars. That's not entirely the truth. They have a larger business as a tier one supplier to other car manufacturers, mainly EV componentry as well as UX and infotainment systems. And that brings about another investor here, which surprisingly is Hyundai Kia Group. They made a strategic investment a couple of years ago, and as far as this joint venture going forward, they are going to retain 12% of Rimac and then Porsche. So when you think about the Volkswagen Auto Group, they're very good at segmenting the different investments they make. Like think about Lamborghini and Ducati are under Audi. So in this case, Volkswagen Auto Group is choosing to have Porsche being the controlling interest in this deal with Rimac. So they're going to have 24% control over Rimac, and then there's going to be the outside investors that Rimac have had either all along or new investors that have come about, 27%, and then there's Mate Rimac. We'll talk more about him later, but to say he's a genius, that's kind of the understatement of the century. He's a combination genius, Iron Man, and Dancing Bear all kind of rolled into one, and that gives you 100% of the ownership, but that still doesn't give us the details of what the actual joint venture is. Rimac itself is still going to be broken out into the tier one supplier. That's going to be 100% owned by Rimac. So that means they're going to have some ownership from Hyundai Kia as well as Porsche, but most of that's going to be owned by Rimac. Then we look at the Bugatti and the Rimac portion. That's going to be split as followed, and this is very, very interesting. 45% Porsche, 55% Rimac. That means Rimac is going to control this joint venture more so than the Volkswagen Auto Group. Now, I wouldn't be doing my own JV of my New York City upbringing combined with my Dave Ramsey cheapskate side justice if I didn't give you guys the following disclaimers. First and foremost, this is still subject to regulatory approval, translated governments as well as other investors that are affected by the deal. And number two, this didn't happen just on July 5th of this year, 2021. This deal took 18 months to negotiate. Then there's Bugatti, and here, what's to say about Bugatti that car guys, car girls, people that have a passing interest in cars, or even your grandmother wouldn't know about Bugatti? I mean, this company is synonymous with uber fast, uber luxury vehicles. They even made trains, they made airplane engines. This was the forefront of technology from the turn of the century, like 100 years ago. So you can start to see how these two things are coming together. this guy Mate Rimac has put together this amazing technology in just 12 years. That's what a Tory Bugatti did back in the day for many forms of transportation, won many races. That's what Mate is kind of doing today. But the thing that they've got in their back pocket is the brand, and then obviously the resources of the Volkswagen Auto Group, and then there's the whole concept of a bespoke vehicle. And we're not talking how the Brits like to use the term bespoke, where, oh, I can get a Bentley that kind of looks this way or has these hides. A Bugatti is kind of like airplanes in how they're put together. It's a different level of technology, and they've maintained that even under the stewardship of the Volkswagen Auto Group. Just think about the 16-cylinder engine that was in the car that came out, 20 years ago. That's a car that had, tires that were $25,000 a piece to support the speed of the vehicle. It wasn't the concept of we want to make a car that looks a certain way or is luxurious. They said, we want this car to go 250 miles an hour, and to do that, it needed technology in a tire that had to cost that much. Or it could drain its entire gas tank in 20 minutes at top speed. And that brings us back to Mate Rimac. My apologies if I am mispronouncing this man's first or last name. You see, there is a part of this deal that I have yet to tell you. Probably one of the most important points of the deal. The man is 33 years old. Yes, I said 33. He was born in 1988. Even more interesting, his company that he founded is 12 years old. Do the math. He founded an EV car company when he was 21. Now, it wasn't one of these things where he just woke up and said, I want to be a tier 1 supplier to OEMs. No, he just wanted to go racing in an E30 3 Series. And it had a gas engine, but the engine blew up, from what I understand. So he had an interest in electric motors, specifically because he was a big fan of Tesla, not the car company, the original Nikolai Tesla. So he decided to convert his E30 3 Series to an EV. But the thing that happened was that it worked. And it didn't just work, it worked really well, to the point where he would mop the floor with other people's asses at racetracks. And he got a lot of press out of it and got other people interested in what the man could do, especially at such a young age. And he got people saying, hey, if we threw some money your way, would you make us a car? And he did get some investment, and that kind of went a bit of a different way. You see, he had kind of lived in different parts of the world. He had lived in Croatia, he had lived in Frankfurt, Germany, went back to Croatia, and he was very much all about Croatia. But the investors, they wanted him to go to the Middle East. He didn't want to go, so he basically said no to their money and figured out a way to keep his business going. And that's how he started the tier 1 supplier business, because that's how he could fund a car company that could make EV hypercars. Does that sound familiar to other hypercars that came back in the day? Think like Ferrari or Bugatti. See how this kind of comes full circle? Anyway, the man did put together a hypercar, which you saw at the Frankfurt Auto Show just 2 years after the company was started. He did a partnership, not an equity partnership, but he met another guy from Croatia who was a designer for General Motors at the time. He penned the original Concept 1 and still works with the car company today. So yeah, as you and I try to determine how we've squandered our lives away after learning about old Mate there, what happens to Bugatti? Well, in the near term, really not that much. Cars will still be manufactured in Molsheim, and the headquarters will remain in Molsheim. However, all of the technology, as well as the Nevera production, will remain in Croatia. However, things are going to change in the medium term. That's when you'll see most of the change, at least the impact on Bugatti. Now, Porsche, Rimac, and Bugatti didn't flat out say, oh yeah, we're going to have a car by this time. But something tells me that you will see an EV Bugatti in the short term, and it will be based on the technology that we see in the Vera. So that's probably what's going to happen to Bugatti in the short to medium term, and you'll probably see them have product development cycles come closer together. But as lovely as that is not why this deal is important, not even close. It's broken out into a couple of things. First and foremost, this is a very large car company, Volkswagen Auto Group, saying we get where governments around the world are going, and they are making a very forward-looking statement by putting a huge bet into EV technology. Yes, this is at like the upper echelon of car building. This is where you get into that bespoke thing we've been talking about, and very expensive cars. So that really will not impact a lot of cars. The real value of this deal is, number one, passing the baton here. Think about what happened. A 33-year-old is going to be controlling a 112-year-old car company, but more importantly, he is going to be controlling the EV technology, at least having a huge say in the EV technology of one of the largest car manufacturers in the world. And that brings us to the absolute most important part of this deal, and that's technology that will be in Bugattis and Rimacs moving forward that will cascade down throughout the Volkswagen Auto Group and most likely into the Hyundai Kia Auto Group, as well as through some of those tier one supplier to OEM relationships that Rimac already has. Now, a huge provision here. What did we say? Volkswagen Auto Group through Porsche maintains 45% ownership in the Bugatti Rimac JV and 24% of Rimac in total. So something tells me they're going to exert some control over where that technology goes, and it's either going to go first into Volkswagen Auto Group products, or it's not going to make it to other car manufacturers. My thinking is, as the technology gets older, they'll probably go through some of those tier one supplier OEM relationships. How do I see it working through the Volkswagen Auto Group? Well, think about how they structured it, and they put it underneath Porsche. My guess is a lot of this technology that Rimac is working on for near to medium term, that's going to show up most likely in a Porsche first, then make its way to like a Bentley, perhaps Lamborghini, and then cascade all the way down to Volkswagens and Audis. And it's here that not just this conversation, but the entire car industry comes full circle. The concept of taking bleeding edge technology and having it cascade down to more affordable cars, that is as old as the car industry itself. Think back to Cadillac when they invented electric starters for their very expensive, very fancy cars at about the same time that Bugatti came about, and then they made their way to Chevys and Fords like 20 years later. This is just a much bigger bet and much farther into the future. So this is a much longer view into the future, and we're going to see product cascade down over many different cycles over this one deal. And that is why this deal is incredibly important. And this is the point of the episode where I turn this around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And once again, I would very much appreciate your assistance with the algorithm and clicking the like button and sharing these on your socials with your friends, especially on Reddit. Now, there is one more thing I want to say here before I press on for the day, and that is a huge congratulations to Mate. You know, over the past 12 years since I've been doing this show, we've got a second show inside the MotoMan Studio where we meet the key people shaping the car, technology, and business worlds. And they have been fascinating with all great stories. But this is a story I have not experienced ever in the 12 years of this show. Actually, the same amount of time it's taken for Mate to build that business. No one has been handed 112 years of history and then said, here's the baton, you're responsible for the next 112 years. So huge congratulations, and think of this as an open invitation to join me on Inside the MotoMan Studio. Would love to hear your whole story and share it with my audience. And with that, until I see you guys in the next episode, bis später.